What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bronx Pinstripe Show. On today's show, I talked to Andy Martino of SNY. He's been on the pod a number of times, but the reason I had him on today is because just yesterday, so I'm recording this on Thursday, you might be listening to this on Friday. On Wednesday, he reported or he wrote an article that said, will the Yankees' external toxicity problem cost them Aaron Judge and other free agents? You'll hear him talk about this and his experience covering the team in the last month or so in a little bit. But basically, external toxicity among fans, social media, unofficial media, and even regular media coverage of the team and the fact that they lost. He said, even some players noticed it. Obviously, they noticed it, but that it was very brutal playing at Yankee Stadium over the weekend as they were getting swept by the Astros. He's not coming at this from an angle of this is right or wrong, that the negativity is justified or not justified. He's just simply reporting facts. And so I talked to him about that. We do get into a little bit if it's justified, but also if it'll cost them Aaron Judge, what Brian Cashman's future is, why there's so much negativity among fans, and a number of other things. Always a fun conversation with Andy. Before we get to that, though, I want to read an email, or actually a Twitter DM from a listener, Football Film Room at FB_film room on Twitter. Definitely suggest you give them a follow. They sent me an awesome message a few days ago. It was, I believe, after game 2. After our game 3 reaction and game 4 reaction, it wasn't necessarily the time and place to read it, but I definitely want to give it its due because I think the information is really interesting. So they said, got some numbers you might be interested in. I think you talked about this a couple of years ago. It's the Yankees' absolute inability to win when they're pitching in low scoring games that is holding them back. Not the fact that they aren't mashing in the playoffs, which is normal. You might not agree with the premise, but their bats aren't suddenly disappearing out of nowhere every time they face the Astros in the postseason. They're facing better starting pitching, and they don't have the starting pitching to match up on their end. The number of games where the Yankees' bats disappeared in the playoffs isn't unusual or even more frequent than the Astros or even the 96 to 2000 Yankees. Going back to 2015, the Yankees have scored 3 runs or less in 39.5% of their playoff games. The Astros have done so in 40.5% of their games. The Dynasty Yankees did so in 39.3% of their playoff games from 96 to 2000. So stepping out from the email for a second, the Yankees recently 39.5%. The Astros recently 40.5%. The Yankees 90s Dynasty 39.3%. Call it 40% for everyone scoring 3 runs or less. All right, getting back to the email. The difference is that these Yankees have not had the starting pitching to be able to win enough of those low-scoring games. They're 1-16 when they don't score 4 runs. 1-16. It's an automatic loss if they don't mash because their pitching isn't good enough. I would also add to this that their manager is not good enough. And in close games, decisions that Boone makes are even more important and magnified. The Astros, by comparison, are 9-25 when they don't score 4, which is a 26.5 win percentage. The 96 to 2000 Yankees were 10-14, 41.7% winning percentage. The fact is, there will be lots of games, about half, in the playoffs where offenses are not there. That's normal. They have to find ways to win despite this. This Yankees team does not. We can do the same analysis for when these teams score 4 runs or less. That has happened in 53.5% of the Yankees playoff games since 2015. It's happened to the Astros in 54.8% of their games. And the 90s Yankees, 54.1%. The records in that time, the Yankees have a 4-19 record. The Astros, 18-28 record. And the Yankees of the 90s, 19-14 record. The Yankees of the 90s were actually above 500 when they scored 4 runs or less. Their pitching was elite. Their bullpen was elite. Mariano Rivera was elite. The Yankees can't win when they don't mash. That's a simple fact. That's a problem in October. It might work against the Guardians and Twins, but not against good teams like the Astros, Rays, and Red Sox, who have all bounced them in recent years. So this, I thought, was fantastic information. It's hard to ignore what the offense didn't do in the Astros series, but you can't expect to score 7 runs in the playoffs against great teams. And if you don't win those low scoring games at a higher percentage than the Yankees are, then they're never going to win a World Series. They're just not winning enough of those games. He's right. The starting pitching hasn't been bad. The starting pitching has not been bad, but it's not been good enough to win those games. It hasn't been good enough, as good as the Astros. The Astros outpitched the Yankees starting wise in every single game. So it's tough to win. Thank you so much to Football Film Room for submitting that really, really great email. There were definitely a lot of late nights in the Yankees playoff run, and I want to thank everyone who tuned into the live post-game reactions. I had a lot of fun doing those, despite the fact that we were talking about Yankees losses quite often. I also want to thank Athletic Greens, because AG1 helped me bounce back every morning after not getting a lot of sleep. AG1 is a daily supplement that you drink first thing in the morning. It's packed with multivitamins, minerals, nutrients that all work together to make you feel like your healthiest self. Some of the many benefits of Athletic Greens include it supports mental clarity and alertness. This is why it's recommended that you drink it first thing in the morning. It promotes gut health with pre and probiotics. It can give you better sleep quality and recovery. I definitely experienced that recovery from lack of sleep during October, but definitely enjoying going to bed a little bit earlier now after the playoff run. And it boosts your energy. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is trusted by athletes and health experts around the world. It tastes good too. I thought, first when I was trying it, I was a little skeptical. I was like, what's it going to taste like? I thought it might taste a little earthy. It's not true at all. It actually tastes really good with just mixing it with water. Each serving costs less than $3, which is probably less than you're spending on a cup of coffee or something like that. So it's super healthy and it's less than $3. So it's $3 well spent. Go to athleticgreens.com/pinstripes for a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. Again, athleticgreens.com/pinstripes. Definitely appreciate everyone who checks out Athletic Greens. Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring today. Enjoy the conversation I had with Andy Martino. All right, I'm very happy to bring back Andy Martino to the podcast. Been on a bunch of times, always fun to talk to him. And Andy, you've been a busy man these past 24 hours with some Yankees news. Why don't you just start by explaining what you reported yesterday about some, toxicity being found by the Yankees internally.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a big scoop or anything. Like, I certainly didn't think of it or a deal. Like, basically, between the Judge home run chase and the playoffs, I was embedded with the team on a daily basis for the better part of, at least a month or whatever it was. And definitely noticed a different and more negative feeling surrounding Yankee land than I've personally noticed in the time I've been covering, which isn't forever, but just an observation. I know that the front office knows it. The players know it. The players certainly noticed the booing over the weekend. I think the front office has definitely noticed the coverage over the past couple of days in the mainstream media, in addition to online media and fans online, wherever that line is, I don't know. But, just the general discussion around the team. They lost. They know that they were not as good as the Astros, but I think it's like, whoa, this is more negative than we usually get after a series loss. And it is, like, objectively, I think it is. There are a lot of reasons for that, of course, but definitely just seems like between social media, which now players are of the age to be sort of native to that and look at it probably too much, and then just the actual vibe in the stadium, you get to the point where people ask, like, well, why would anyone want to be a Yankee as opposed to like a Padre or a Brewer or a Cardinal or something like that? And I think that calculation, look, it's an individual choice for any given player, but it's just not particularly fun right now to be involved with the Yankees. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I think fans, I can speak as a fan. I can't speak to what you guys in the media are covering, but you guys are also trying to be objective. So you're calling it like you see it. I think there's a lot of negativity around this team because there was high expectations, especially after the way they started. They had the best record in baseball through June. And then I actually put this out on Twitter the other day. From July 1st through the end of the season, through the postseason, they were below 500. So when you finish a very big portion of the season that way and lose to the Astros for the third time in the ALCS in the last few years, there's obviously going to be negativity. But specifically, you're saying the players felt that over the weekend at the stadium.
Oh yeah, like I talked to agents who were like, "Boy, I talked to so and so on his way out, and he said it was pretty brutal." You know, and these are guys who have been Yankees before, so like this was more brutal. This was like,
Yeah.
geez.
We were in the stadium on Saturday. Okay,
Well,
that
tell me
was
then. I was in the press box. You have a better advantage than me or the players
we
on
were
that.
sitting in left field. It was by far the worst experience I've ever had at a baseball game.
Oh, tell me
Um,
more. For real.
they obviously I've been to games where they've lost worse. I went to an Orioles game, they were losing 10-0 in the first inning. Okay. It's like, but that's a regular season game. You don't have Garrett Cole on the mound with high expectations, hoping to get back into an ALCS. And what happened was in the second inning, I mean, you saw it was a clown show. You drop a pop up. Garrett Cole says, "No, I got your back," and then proceeds to give up a home run. It's like it could not have possibly gone any worse. Compound the fact that the team is coming off 2 games where they got their butts kicked, did not do anything offensively, are still not doing anything offensively. And the vibe went from high expectations pregame to disappointment to almost there was a sense of making fun of how bad they were in the stands. And that I've never actually experienced at a game.
Oh, there was a huge like sarcastic cheer when something
Yes,
happened. Remind me what it was.
exactly. It was a 2-out walk, I think.
Was it to Carpenter maybe?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
they had 2 runners on. They still,
Yeah.
I don't even think they had only 1 hit to that point, and it wasn't like, oh, we've got a rally going. It was like, oh, let's see how they mess this up, right? Like that was the vibe in the stadium. So I'm sure that came across to the players as well.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, it was the worst game I've ever been to, because I've never been to a game where the fans, I've been to games where fans booed. I've never been to a game where they were like mocking their team on the field. And that's to the point it got. And then once you fall down 3-0, you know you're not coming back. The ironic thing is game 4 was the most competitive game they played, but ultimately they lost. So I'm sure players felt all of that. And they have the right to do that, just like fans have the right to boo and mock whoever they want. So I guess to your point, you were saying through the Judge home run chase, I thought that was as electric and positive of a crowd has been in a long time.
Yeah.
As he was chasing the home run.
Yeah, it wasn't a crowd in the stadium at that point. I guess to sort of be clear about the timeline and what I'm saying, like prior to the Houston series, I was already kind of talking to people in the organization about like, boy, these players, a lot of the things that are, I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of the things that are negatively said about them online, they're aware of. Is there anything that can be done about that? Or is it just that people this age are going to look at that stuff and participate in it in some cases? I mean, I think that there've probably always been loud negative opinions about everything, right? Including athletes, but now those opinions are readable on one's phone. So that's something that baseball people probably all over are trying to figure out, how can we protect players from that, or, help them regulate that intake. And I think over the second half when the Yankees were playing poorly a lot, I probably got to them more. I agree with you that the Judge chase was a positive experience at the stadium. And then overall with the team, there was just like a lot of criticism. I guess a lot of it was online, but a lot of things that had a life of their own, like the Boone thing about the roof, which was just like a fine, totally normal, rational comment that spun out into this big thing. Aaron Boone's a big... Oh, yeah. I was the one that asked the question. I was there. It was totally fine.
No, maybe not the roof, but what about the fact Luis Severino is pointing to Judge's exit velocity versus Bregman's exit velocity?
Well, the word lucky probably was inartfully chosen, But, this is also the guy that popped off about the Clay Holmes situation without knowing anything about it a few days earlier. So that's who we're dealing with in Severino.
So
Um,
I think there's a buildup where every year the Yankees have lost in the playoffs.
mhm.
It's more about, and I've talked to you about this before. It's more about Boone staying positive and Cashman saying, he liked their process and all of that stuff, and that the postseason, the general thought that the postseason is a crapshoot and there's lucky teams and there's unlucky teams. So there's that whole sort of backstory to this, and then so to hear the team point to a roof being open and exit velocities, I think rubbed people the wrong way. Whereas they could just say Judge's ball didn't go out and he hit it hard and Bregman's ball went out and that's the difference in the game. Like, just move on.
You know why that, if I may, Andrew, you know why that really bothered, not you saying it, but why that bothered me a lot. Actually, I'm like, that made me more pissed off than most things do, like the reaction to that. And I'll tell you why. Because it's my job as an intermediary between the team and the fans to explain the game. It's not my job to have an opinion. It's not my job to whatever. It's like my job to say, like, here's what these in that moment, here's what these people were experiencing, and here's what they thought, and here's why. So I asked Boone, did you think Judge's ball had a chance to be out? And he has a choice there, really, to be like, no, we just got to win, or say something really boring, or whatever, or to say, like, yes, I did, and here's why. And because he was able to because he was willing to answer the question honestly, I was then able to write more accurately, and the fans were able to read more accurately. Um, so this whole idea of like not making excuses prevents us from knowing like the truth and information. And I really appreciate it when someone who I'm interviewing will actually tell me what they think. Um,
I agree.
so
So
when Boone
did
got
they
killed for it, that bothered me.
did Boone also say, well, we really didn't even score 2 runs because the 2 runs we scored were
Yes,
unearned? And
absolutely. Whether he said exactly that or not, that's the other thing about it. One can cherry pick a video. It's happened to me before. Stuff I've said on the air. Like the rest of the press conference was about all the other things they did wrong. So yeah, and
so
then that was that question about that. You know.
then I think that's just the unfortunate reality of the world, the media world we're in now, where
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you have a 5-minute press conference and 4.5 minutes are spent on something else, but then half a minute is spent on the exit velocity. People are going to
Yeah.
run with what people run with what they
Yeah.
choose to. And
For
so,
sure.
so if the Yankees, being upset about that is one thing. Do you think that will, preclude them from re-signing free agents or having Brian Cashman back? Like how
Mhm.
much of an impact is that feeling in the clubhouse, which I absolutely trust your reporting on? How much of an impact do you think that's going to have moving forward?
It depends on the individual. Obviously, in money talks, there's so many factors with Aaron Judge, for example. Where does he want to play? Well, the Yankees don't know. He holds it very close to the vest. Where does his wife want to live? Who's willing to offer the most money? There's so many, like the analogy that Boone used to use. I don't know if he does anymore. But he says like ingredients baked in the cake. These are all ingredients baked in the cake. But another ingredient in the cake now is how you can hit 62 home runs and they can boo anyway, and like you can be the second best team in the American League and they still hate you. And if you think that, so players, and I'm not pretending to speak to Aaron Judge's mentality. To be very clear, he doesn't say anything to anybody, including the Yankees, about what he thinks about any of this. Uh, I'm just talking more generally about players. They're going to tell their agents. Their agents are going to talk. They're going to talk to each other. Hey, dude, what's it like being a Yankee? Oh, it sucks. We're like that is just an ingredient baked into the cake, and the Yankees can still use money to paper over things like that if they want to. Um, so it's not so clear as to say like this will cost them Judge, this will cost them a future free agent, but it's definitely like not seen as fun to be a New York Yankee right now. That's all I could say. And however any individual player or executive wants to weigh that, then is their own calculations and their own ingredients in the cake.
Obviously, winning can cure all, but putting that aside, I think there was also that vibe in 2008 with the team, that it was not fun to be a New York Yankee. Actually, they talked about this in the Jeter documentary. And that started to change when they brought in Sabathia and Swisher and
Yeah.
Burnett and some of these guys that had a little bit more, positive impact on the clubhouse. They'd go out to dinner together, more fun, right? Just flat out more fun. Now, they won in 2009. I understand that's probably the biggest factor here,
Mm-hmm.
but isn't it also about the players in the clubhouse and how they're responding to the situation?
Oh, definitely. Look, that situation you allude to, that was the front office felt like the clubhouse had become broken. I don't know what was said about it in the Jeter documentary, but I know what I know about it. And Jeter was seen as part of that problem.
Yeah,
Too
they
serious.
alluded to it. They actually, went into
Yeah,
that.
So, yeah, I'm not in the habit of watching things that are produced by the subject and his agent, but I'll take your word for it that that's what they said.
Well, I thought it was going to be pretty fluffy, and it actually had a little bit more. It went a little bit deeper than I was expecting, which was
Well,
nice.
that's good. Maybe I'll check it out. I mean, seriously, like that. That's good to hear. But yeah, so they felt like they needed to lighten things up. Johnny Damon was a help with that. He was already there, of course, by '09. CC was seen as a big help to that. So I guess you know all that history. So yeah, it has to do with the players. I thought it was a pretty good group this year. It was a group that I enjoyed dealing with. Um, Judge is very buttoned up. Stanton's very buttoned up, but a really good guy, smart guy, great perspective. Um, and the rotation was filled with solid guys. I mean, they've actually focused on having a better clubhouse this year. So yeah, there's just a lot of ingredients in there, and winning would have helped this, but wouldn't have erased the issue. Some of these issues I'm talking about that are probably league wide, but magnified in New York because there's more scrutiny. I mean, again, if you could make a ton of money to go play for the Padres and make the same money to play for the Yankees, why on earth did you pick the Yankees? Is where this is sort of coming to.
It comes down to the person, right? Like, I'm sure some people thrive in the New York, or it's really not just New York, Boston, Philly, like these markets that live and breathe the team. Like, it's important to people here. It's less important to people around the country. So that's fine. If that's the player would rather pick that, like, I don't fault anyone. And you're right. It ultimately is going to come down to money. I mean, the fact is New York's probably the best place to win and the worst place to lose.
Sure. Yeah. New York, Boston. I worked in Philly. That's an unpleasant place to lose as well. Like, but not as bad. They don't care as much about baseball in Philly as they do in New York and Boston, I don't think. So yeah, I agree with what you said. And yeah, it comes down to the person. Do you want to be part of that or not? We're going to find out what Judge feels about that in the relatively near future here.
I think if Judge leaves and there's reporting, and certainly if he says this, that the atmosphere was a factor here, I think that'll have an immense impact.
I don't think he would ever say it. He's not wired that way.
What if it's leaked? What if it somehow there's reporting that not the reason, but one of the reasons Judge chose to go to the Giants or whoever is because of how the atmosphere was around the team and the negativity around the team at the end of the 22 season.
What kind of impact do you think that makes then?
I think because of who he is, that has a huge impact. I don't know necessarily that. I think it's actually gets worse. People aren't going to suddenly be positive. I think that gets worse, and it kind of snowballs out of control.
I don't know what makes it better, honestly. It's a tough time to be a Yankee fan, I think, or a Yankee or anything, because in some ways the whole franchise, and it's by that I include everything around it, including the fans, the whole world is sort of paying the price is not the right word, but almost like suffering from the memory of the most recent dynasty and probably having a hard time with the fact that is not possible anymore. And that what we're seeing from the Yankees over the past decade is basically what it looks like to be successful in baseball now. Look at the Dodgers.
Yep.
So that's just tough when you have the memory of the late 90s to compare it to. It'll never feel as good. I'm sorry, but
it's never.
Tell me if you think I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. We're likely never going to, that's a once in a generation dynasty for any sport that barely happens. And when it does happen, it's amazing. I think you tweeted this or you wrote this recently, this sort of mentality that the Yankees have. Yankees players keep repeating, well, we didn't win the championship,
Yeah,
so the season is a failure. And I think your point was that, well, it's not that black and white. Like there's successes other than winning a championship. And I completely agree with you. But if the Yankees are going to have that mentality, whether they should or shouldn't, then of course fans are also going to have that mentality.
sure. Do they still? I mean, have we heard that lately? Maybe we probably have. I don't know.
It's less, and I think there's more realism among fans. Like going into the season, I don't know that people thought this was a championship caliber team.
Yeah,
But again, you have the best record, and it's July 1st. You have the best record in baseball. I mean, of course you're thinking championship.
sure. As was I. I was like, this might be the year that they win the championship. I totally understand the disappointment from there. I think it's the Yankees' fault more broadly that this is the rhetoric around the team. It's George Steinbrenner's fault, and Derek Jeter didn't help, and others he was just so prominent in saying that.
But when you win almost every year, you can have that rhetoric. When you
Yeah,
haven't won, when none of these players have won on this current team with the Yankees, so
right,
it's kind of like there's no backing to it.
right. That's right. That's just not how it's sort of become a silly thing to say because it's not how it works out for them. And I mean, I know that the teams like front office and PR arm and stuff like that would love to get away from that Steinbrenner type rhetoric. They started it years ago. Different people. Steinbrenner's long gone. Obviously, Hal doesn't say that. He's always asked about, do you think that? And he's like, tries to not contradict his father while still not agreeing with his father. That's a tricky one for him to thread, right? And he really does define himself against the way his father behaved in some ways. Admirably so. I mean, in many ways, George Steinbrenner was very, very difficult. And did a lot of things that cost the Yankees a lot of opportunities to win, obviously. And then they won a lot too. It's a very complicated legacy, right? And Hal doesn't want to be like his dad. That's pretty clear. People use that as a negative. I'm sure he sees that as something to aspire to not quite be like that. But I don't think he wants that rhetoric around the team. But George Steinbrenner started it, and it doesn't die easily.
I want to talk about Cashman too. And I think you wrote something today that because Hal yesterday said Boone is coming back, he was under contract, so that's not really a huge surprise there. But you wrote today that does not necessarily mean Cashman is definitely coming back. I think there's still the belief that Cashman will be back, but that's yet to be determined. Last time you were on the show was, I think, right after the trade deadline. We talked about how important of a trade deadline it was for Cashman, how he's going to set this team up for success. I still liked a lot of the moves they made.
Same.
They just didn't work out, right? Like, it's not his fault. Andrew Benintendi got hurt.
He had a hamate bone that the doctor forgot to take out. What kind of luck is that for the Yankees?
So it's like, you can't blame him for that. I mean, clearly everyone was killing the Harrison Bader trade up until Harrison Bader had the best postseason out of any of them. So, okay, fine. You get an A+ for that one, Cashman. But I do put some criticism to him on the Montes trade because it really seems like they acquired an injured pitcher. So like that, you have to take criticism. If you're going to take the credit for Bader, you got to take the criticism for Montes. And so, but like ultimately it wasn't a great trade deadline. And the team fizzled out. So how are you assessing how things are going to proceed from here with Cash?
Well, yeah. So like you said, what I wrote most recently was that, I just noticed that everyone, once Hal made those comments about Boone returning last night, I was like, oh, they're both back. It's like, no. These situations are not related. Like a manager under contract, obviously, and the Boone's just finished year 1 of 3. That's not really a decision. It's just the status quo. You're unless you're going to fire him, which is a whole other thing. So saying that is one thing, and the fact that they have to agree to a new deal and mutually agree to continue the relationship, and then agree to a new deal between Steinbrenner and Cashman is a whole other situation. and it has not in any way been resolved yet. We are not getting a press release in 10 minutes saying that they have agreed to terms. It hasn't happened. I've also reported that people around there expect it to, but it has not. And until something does, it might not. I'm not sitting here saying to you, Andrew, like, oh, he's coming back. It's just a formality. No, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like it's unresolved. We'll see.
What's your feeling?
When it's been uncertain in the past, there's a long track record of him actually ending up feeling very loyal to the Yankees and the Yankees to him. It means a lot to Cashman. His relationship with Steinbrenner was difficult, but he sees him as the person who created his career. He's come back before when he's wanted to leave. That's well documented in the past. Ultimately, his emotions have pulled him back to the Yankees, and ultimately the Steinbrenner family has entrusted him. So history tells us that it usually works out, but each time it has the ability to potentially not.
Yeah. You also, last time you were on, we're talking about how revered Cashman is among other executives in the game. Often,
Yeah,
they call him the best GM or one of the best GMs in the league. So I know the opinion on him around the league is very positive. Again, going back to the negativity around, of the fans and some of the, I guess, non-official media covering the team is more negative towards Cashman. So, how would you, from an objective standpoint, you're not a Yankees fan, how would you grade how he's done with this team? I guess since 2017, if we're going to call it, this is the most recent, era, the Judge era.
And you're right. It is very bizarre sitting in my spot. I mean, I don't know the difference between the way fans regard him and the way the industry regards him is so stark. It's very striking. Really, like, one of the greatest GMs in the history of the game is how a lot of peers see him. Certainly now, working now, if not ever. We know how fans have been thinking of him lately, especially. So that is interesting contrast. My personal opinion is that he's done a really good job. I mean, they've been a winning team. I think a winning record for 30 straight years is remarkable in this sport. And I say 30 because by the time they started that streak, he was high up in Gene Michael's front office. So he's been a part of that group, all 30. There was a transition to analytics in the post-Moneyball era that came out of nowhere and then was built into one of the leading teams in terms of analytics and technology. And then over the past 12 to 18 months, there was actually a transition a bit more toward defense, athleticism. They valued makeup, like personality traits and how they established this roster. I mean, Jose Trevino versus Gary Sanchez is an example of the adjustment they made. Analytics was like Gary Sanchez. Finally, they were like, we need a guy that can work with the pitchers.
Yeah.
So Cashman's been quite agile along the way with, even in the past year, with changes. Think about how different this team is that finished this year than it was that opened the 2021 season.
Oh, yeah.
Torres and Voit, short and first, versus IKF and Rizzo. I mean, I'm not saying IKF was a good move, but I'm saying look at the difference in approach.
Absolutely. It's one of the main reasons I think a lot of people thought this year was going to be different.
Yeah.
Was
me
because
too.
they made changes. They seemingly addressed some of the biggest problems that cost this team in the postseason. And then, the offense disappeared in the end, which, ultimately the players didn't perform.
And I think it's legit to say that if they had Benintendi,
huge difference. I mean, that first of all, the Cleveland series ends in 4 games if Andrew Benintendi's playing left field because he catches like 4 bloops that fell in and cost the Yankees runs. So on the
short Mayu, by the way, those are their contact guys, and they didn't have them.
On the shortstop. So who do you put blame on for how shortstop was handled the last couple of weeks? Because my opinion was you can't have a different starting shortstop every night in the postseason and expect to win a championship.
Well, I think when it comes down to it, if you're the manager making the lineups, which he does, by the way, you're looking at like do or die tonight. What do I have to do? I got to get IKF out of there. It doesn't look right. Then another matchup comes along, and you're like, yeah, I guess I got to go. I mean, yeah, more consistency would have been better, but you got to try to win the day at that point of the season. I think Boone deserves credit for seeing that IKF was playing tight. Like, that was Boone. That was all Boone, my understanding. We got to get him out of there. Putting him back in, but that's how it played out.
Well, is that a Boone call, or is that influence from?
It was all Boone. So if you want to assign credit or blame, go Boone, Carlos Mendoza. My understanding is their analytics game planning guy is not even in the lineup meetings. It's Boone and the coaching staff that make the lineup. So any feeling you want to have one way or the other.
With input, like, right? I mean, there's input from the analytics.
Not direct input, like not in that meeting. Like, they have a meeting about the lineup. It's Boone and his bench coach, Carlos Mendoza, and some staff. I mean, of course, they're getting information all the time.
Right, that's what I'm alluding to. They're getting information, and they're using the information that analytics is giving them to make what they think is the right decision.
That's right. But they're not even including necessarily those people giving them information in the meeting to determine the lineup.
Boone's not getting an email every morning with the lineup like a lot of people think he is.
Not even close. I'm telling you, not even to the point where he's having that conversation with analytics. He's getting information, and they're having a collaborative dynamic all the time. So it's not so easily divided. Like, who's analytics and who's not is not even that easily divided. Like, Tim Nearing is one of the greatest scouts in baseball, possibly, and he's also like super into analytics. So it's not like one could that easily even say which is which. Like, people aren't categorized that way always, but Boone makes the lineups. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think the shortstop was a microcosm for the failures of this team this year, and it was a huge problem in the playoffs. And it was just tough. I think it's just tough. I mean, you saw a different left fielder almost every night, a different leadoff hitter every game in the ALCS. It's just, when you have that much influx, it's hard to beat a team like the Astros. Like, the bottom line is the Astros are better than the Yankees. Like, I've been saying that all along. And so, like, even if things were lined up perfectly for the Yankees, it was still going to be a tough series. But then you compound all of those issues. They're not hitting, lineup in flux. It's like, yeah, you're going to get your butts kicked.
Yep. Agree.
So last thing I want to ask you is, obviously the Cashman staying or going will happen before we get a decision on Judge, because they'll hire or they'll rehire Cashman and he'll make that decision, or a new GM will make that decision. But if Judge does walk, does that sort of mark, do you think, the end of this era of the Yankees, and they almost have to turn the page and go in a little bit of a different direction starting next year? Because he's clearly the face of the franchise.
I think they've been ending it gradually all along, right? The baby bombers thing was a nice phrase, but really, what is that? That means you throw a lot of your prospects up and see who sticks.
Yeah.
And one did, right? Two did, Judge and Severino. When did the era end? I don't know. Did it end this year when
I think the era is Judge. I think the era is Judge. And if Judge is on this team for the next decade, obviously it's not going to last for the next decade, but he will be he's the linchpin there.
Yeah. I think it doesn't feel to me like they're in that youth movement era anymore anyway. Which is fine. You always have to adjust and adapt, and that's what Cashman's good at, is not being married to like one thing or one approach. One of the things he's good at. Certainly if Judge is gone, different era, of course, for sure. I don't know what that new era would be defined by. We'll see. Sometimes these things come unexpectedly. Look at the Phillies right now.
Yeah.
Like, what the roster that they have right now is not supposed to be an era. An era is like Utley, Rollins, Howard, like Hamels, like that was a Phillies era. And now they're in the World Series like randomly. What is that, the Schwarber era? I don't even know.
Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper era. Come on.
Yeah, okay. But it's like not – they have like a bad team that just got hot. I don't know how to –
I know, and that's the thing that's so annoying.
They don't have a bad team. You know what I'm saying, before they jump all over.
But they finished third in the division. And
they're okay. And then they got hot. You know how frustrating that is for the Yankees to feel like they're doing everything in the right way, and then some flawed team gets hot?
It's frustrating in general. It's like, oh, the playoffs are random. Look at the Phillies. Look at the Nationals when they won. They get hot at the right time. The Braves last year, kind of a similar thing. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. But then why are the Astros going to their 4th World Series and have been in the ALCS every single year?
Well, because they're really, really well run and good.
Okay,
And
that's what we
they
want for the
cheated.
Yankees.
Well, they cheated for a good part of that, but now they're not cheating. So there's a lot of answers to that. They're just really good, and they get hot. They get hot because they're good. It's different than the Phillies.
Yeah, it's like at a certain point, I understand the Astros cheated. I've talked to you about that a bunch, but at a certain point, you just have to acknowledge they're good.
Oh, they're definitely amazing. But I just think if we're ever going to say like, and they did it this X amount of years, you'd be like, okay, but 3 of those they were cheating.
Yeah,
Man, that is part of that number of years.
Yeah, but in my mind, this is going to say a lot of Yankee fans are going to kill me for this, but the fact that they've continued to do it after they stopped cheating, I mean, if anything, it just proves cheating was worthless, right? Like,
look, Jeff Luhnow was really good at his job, whatever kind of ethics he had. I mean, most of what's happening now is a result of the international signings that happened on his watch. These pitchers, well, I just mean like one pitcher after another, most of whom were organizational signings from Latin America. I'm talking about Valdez and Urquidy and Luis Garcia, and the list goes on. A lot of in Verlander, who they acquired, of course. I mean, a lot of this is still what they did so well, that previous regime.
Yeah. All right, Andy. I appreciate you coming on. We scheduled this last minute. Definitely thank you for the time, and it'll be fascinating to see what happens with this team in the offseason.
Happy to do it, Andrew. Anytime.